Welcome to Theorycraft, a live podcast where game developers and their players engage in conversation. We're back. Candace should be joining us. She may be on the way. Up there she is now. Perfect timing. Get her up here.
Oh, well, let's just talk about like games we're playing and all that sort of stuff.
I'll go first because I didn't mention this last week. I loved the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I finally finished it. So cool what they did with that. So cool where that's going. And that's all I really have to say. Anyone else?
Played some Dark and Darker. That was really interesting. Marauders came out, which I'm excited to try as well, but haven't had a chance. What else have I been playing? A little bit more played up with friends. But just busy with a lot of other things.
I was listening to the last podcast you guys did. I wasn't able to join, so I heard you guys talk about Dark and Darker a bit. Yeah, cool game. I think it was interesting because it's sort of like Tarkov, but different. But a lot of the Tarkov influence was actually playing it, which I think there's always this expectation of like, oh, well, it's strictly a shooter. No one's going to be interested in if it veers out of that model. But, I think that's interesting that even Tarkov influencers are playing Tarkov likes that aren't shooters. So that's cool.
Yeah. And then I was sad to see the thing that they ripped off almost, line for line, which was the UI, which is probably the weakest of the Tarkov experience.
Yes.
So I was like, oh no. Like their vendors and like all of their UI just looks so ripped. I was like, oh god. But it's another reminder of like, if you guys want to work instantly in the industry, just become a UI or UX designer. Like
that's true.
Good UI UX designers right now are still like so hard to come by.
Yes. Yeah. We haven't hired ours yet, and I am not looking forward to that search. But we'll see. Yeah, and it's been interesting to follow the Lich King hype. I definitely feel like this expansion's a lot more popular with players than BC was. BC, it just felt like, I don't know if it was so close to the WoW Classic release or something, but it just seemed like BC people weren't that interested in. But Lich King, it does seem like a lot of people are playing it and it's doing pretty well.
Yeah, from an outsider looking in, unfortunately, I haven't been able to follow it very closely, but I will say it's interesting in the design approach because Classic was very no changes, and then TBC sort of went with some changes.
Yeah.
And, that opens the door of, well, what's the right thing to change? And I think there were a fair number of things that the community didn't appreciate them changing. And so I think there's a very real possibility that they got better at deciding what to change and what was worth changing for Wrath in order to like ensure the original experience. And so that's potentially why people are appreciating it a little more.
Yeah.
But I'd be guessing.
Yeah, so much crunch time on that project.
Right. Yeah, that's true. We didn't really get a lot of your stories from the Foxhole last time because you weren't around. I was hoping to hear some of them. You designed a lot of your favorite spells during that expansion. Why don't you share something with us?
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, we will work together on that expansion, and we were very ambitious about like redoing the talents because the talents, I mean, we updated them in Burning Crusade, of course, but it was always like something that we're just always trying to plus and improve, and we're navigating all of that cookie cutter build stuff, trying to like create real choice in the system, which is always a battle. But I mean, I think we did a lot of really great work in that expansion on the talents, and at least maybe not from a balance perspective, but from a player enjoyment. I definitely think they're creative and interesting and fun, and bring a lot of life to the game. So there's a lot of spells that we made that expansion that I love. A lot of the priest stuff, especially for me, I really liked working on. It was interesting on Twitter. Everybody loved Penance. Penance is actually a very simple spell. It's just 3 bolts of channeled healing or damage into somebody.
Well, I warmed the crowd up for you because, I created Lightwell, so you could have created anything and they would have appreciated it more. So
I loved Lightwell.
The greatest opening band you could ask for.
Yeah. I love Lightwell. I wanted Lightwell to work. I kept trying to save that spell to make it work.
Right.
But that's the problem, and this is what spurred the healing.
You can lead a rogue to water, but you can't make him drink. Is the problem?
Well, it was part of like the the canary in a coal mine with healing and mana, right? Because Lightwell is great when mana really matters, because you summon it for a low amount of mana, and then the raid uses
Or
it as
time,
basically
if your
as a
globals are
bandage,
really
right?
under
It uses
pressure.
exactly. Use it as a bandage, and so the perfect time to use Lightwell in some fights is like, say, Lotheb or something in Nax, right? Like it's where everybody has everyone's already used their bandage and mana. There's no time to heal anybody, and you just use the light. That's where the Lightwell really sings. And the Lightwell just never mattered for a long time because everybody had unlimited mana. Everybody has self-healed. Like it went bonkers after some point, right? Mana regen on stats and gear and stuff. But I mean, I love the fantasy of that spell. I love that it's still. I don't play Hearthstone a lot, but I know it's a cool spell, at least for a while in Hearthstone. But yeah,
awesome.
So yeah, that was a good spell too.
So I can't remember at all, Chris, but what classes did you do, and which classes did I do?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're the only two class designers at the time. Of course, Chris was supporting and helping us build some stuff that were complicated.
And John went to trade skills.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we kind of mostly split it. I did the Warlock, Druid, Priest, Hunter, and a little bit of Shaman maybe, and I think you did the rest. So I remember you did Warrior, Rogue, the melee.
I also didn't do anything. I didn't do barely anything on the Death Knight. Is that the same for you, or did you help with that as well?
Death Knight gets really foggy. I think there's a lot of different stories of people who came up with different things there, but a lot of that was Greg and Travis and
right.
It was that was a complicated class because there was like multiple hats and multiple like stakeholders there. I try to like avoid that.
Right, smart. Yeah.
But I remember, working with Tom, he just wanted us to like pitch a bunch of abilities for it. And so I sent him a lot of different ideas. I thought a cool vibe for the Death Knight was Force. If you think about Emperor Palpatine with like
Force lightning.
Force lightning and that sort of like Jedi movement and that sort of stuff I thought was cool. And I pitched like a spell called Death Grip, but it was more of I think what eventually turned into Asphyxiation, where it's basically a channeled stun. Actually, they changed it to more of like an instant stun that you just kind of floated there with that Force Grip channel. But eventually, at first, it was more. It was like channeled like the Death Knight channeled the stun, right? But then the team was just like, I hate melee and channels and cast sucks. It's so stupid. Don't do that. And so eventually, it turned into instant. But I thought that rule was kind of weird. I think melee maybe could, depending on what the spell is. But so there's like multiple ideas with Death Grip, and I think Brazi at some point changed it to basically a teleport. And then at that, the teleport felt weird, and so instead we changed it to more of a grip, like a reverse knockback, right?
Right.
So and I think that's probably the most iconic spell in Death Knight.
Yeah, the pull.
But I also remember. Do you remember the explosions? Do you remember Slim Greeny, the VFX artist?
No.
Okay. So the Death Knight, every spell. So there was this VFX artist who worked at in film or something like that, and every spell he made had this white flash. Like it was blindingly, and you could still see this in some of the spells. We've toned it down after, and I would in the meetings, if you remember, we used to have VFX review meetings on the spells.
Yes.
And this was a time where Alan Dilling and some of the StarCraft guys came back on loan for a bit to help us through production. Because back then there was zero spell effect artists, VFX artists on WoW. Zero. They were done by the prop artists. When the prop artists were like had free time, they may make a few VFX. Like if you look at the old WoW spells, there's very little VFX, right? Like they were all flip book sort of things. They weren't.
Yeah, the animators originally did them. So
yeah. So
and that whole team walked out shortly after WoW.
And that's why a lot of Warlock spells sound like spacey. It's because they all came off of like StarCraft 2 Crunch and we're making spells for Lich King. So that was I think StarCraft was still in production, but we pulled them out temporarily. I forgot what happened, but that should happen all the time at Blizzard. Was you move different teams
team members.
who was crunching.
Just all hands on deck for release.
Yeah.
Wow.
But anyways, I remember like every meeting, Slim would show the VFX for the Death Knight, and I hated them because they were just like these explosions, and it was this white flash. And I said, "You got to get rid of the white flash." And he was this French guy who I think hated me because I was the only one who said, Chris Robinson was in the meetings, the art director, and he didn't say anything. I was like,
right. Like, that was common, if I remember. It's like one game designer and a bunch of artists, and all the artists are freaking out about how awesome it is. And you're like, you realize this is the button they're going to be pushing every 6 seconds, right? Or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like you can't be blinding everybody every 6 seconds.
So I complained about this, and he complained to his lead, and he got his way, right? And whatever. But then one day, Jeff Kaplan was playing a Death Knight, and he said, he came into our office, the class pit, and said, "Why the hell is every spell an explosion on the Death Knight?" And after that moment, they changed it all. And then Slim eventually, either he got fired or he quit. I forgot, but yeah. So,
right.
But yeah. So I think even the players saw some of that. But anyway, small story of that time period. But there's a million stories like that.
So good.
Was it common for feedback to just kind of stack up that way? I mean, has that changed over time, or is this like an anomalous story? Like it really sticks out in your brain? Like, did it stay wrong for a long time and then finally just get unblocked when the boss walked in? Or typically, like, would you guys chisel it down a little bit more and it wouldn't have to be this way?
I have stories of sort of both experiences. The big one I tell on stream a lot is the Night Elf dance. I wasn't even able to finish my sentence, because she has the stripper pole dance, right? And this is how far I got into the sentence. I think it's too sexy. And then they all erupted in laughter and no, blah, 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 right? And the rest of my sentence was for the Night Elf. I think it would have been better on the human. And I never did even get a chance to say the rest of that because I was like sort of laughed out of the room. It was pretty hilarious. But then a lot of times they were very open to feedback, and I was able to kind of single-handedly, walk them through, these are the gameplay concerns. This is how this spell's going to be used. This is why this is too much or too little or whatever, right? Like save the Death Star exploding effects for spells we know you're going to be doing once every 5 or 10 minutes, the big cooldowns. And, I was able to pretty effectively pull them back from, making spells that were all over the top. Because every artist wants to like flex, if they're only going to make one thing, it's going to be the greatest thing they've ever made. And it's like,
it's tough when you're just starting out too. You don't want to undershoot it, right? Like you want
to make an impression.
You need to hit the point of satisfaction and then maybe start pulling back from there and figure out what like the minimum expression is,
Right. And then you have a designer telling you do worse, right? Essentially is how they're taking it, right? And it's like, no, that's not what I want. Like,
go ahead, Chris.
Got it. Oh no, it was just another thing I remember is like some of the newer artists would join, and they would. I remember this one time an artist made a boat, or it's like a tugboat or something like that, and it looked awesome, but it had literally more polygons than all of Stormwind. And so that was often like a huge thing. It's just like, WoW was made to run on like any machine, and so it was often so jarring for newer artists, especially if they just came out of college, to like basically tone everything down,
Welcome, welcome, Candace. By the way, no, Candace just popped up here. I wanted to say hi.
I tried to segue in when he's like, that dance was too sexy. I was going to be like, speaking of too sexy, hi, Theorycraft.
Yeah. The other common one was new artists would hate doing icons. Because they're like, oh, I got hired at Blizzard. The next thing I'm going to be working on is one of those giant, like, E3 murals, that they hang in the booth, right? And it's no, here's some icons for you to kick out. And they hated it. The players, like, if you think about all the icons over the years and how iconic so many of them have become and how beloved by the players, But it was a tough sell every time you were talking to an artist.
Yeah, and the sad thing is that they would usually give it to an artist who's never done them before. And then there'd be so many reps they would do until they looked acceptable and were good, and learned contrast and like the colors. And you have to think about how small they usually are on like the buff bar or something like that. And so anyways, after they mastered them, then it was like, okay, now they're ramped up. They're never doing icons again. And then you're back to, then you're to some more junior artists again, doing them again. And it was really kind of frustrating for designers who, like for me, I really, the icons I thought were so, no pun intended, iconic. And it was something that I thought should be taken seriously. I know a lot of them, are very beloved and part of like art and stuff like that today. But LaCraft too. He was another person who just obsessed about icons. But
someone made that background, PC background or monitor background that was full of just WoW icons, and it was just amazing. Like to see them all in one place.
Now AI generated art can make WoW icons in seconds. So
wow.
Jesus Christ.
I don't know. Yeah.
That last picture that somebody posted about like the AI sort of anime stylized renders of all the characters. Incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And then in other news, like Overwatch 2 came out. I think it's actually been doing quite well numbers wise, I've heard. And they've had like all the queues and stuff like that. And they've had some hiccups, but have you guys, any of you been playing it or?
No, I've played absolutely zero.
I've been going back. I've watched a ton of streamers. It's good to see all the creative fruits of that team finally get to come out and shine. Like I know, a ton of work that's gone in on the sound design side. There have been a lot of philosophy shifts, but I do think that overall it really does still kind of present as the same game being re-released for the sake of changing up the monetization. So it's cool to see like all the eyeballs back on it and like Overwatch having a moment again, but I don't know how long it's going to last in the zeitgeist. I feel like, I don't know. I haven't really been tracking like who's still super duper invested in it, but it just doesn't, until like the PvE comes out, it feels tough for me to feel like 2 is kind of really here. And I never really followed it a ton for the esports and everything, but yeah, so it's nice that it's popping up again, but have you been playing it?
Yeah, I've been playing it like every other night or so. One thing about the game is it's incredibly well polished in terms of like the animations, the art, everything is great. But I think it suffers from the same problems I had with Overwatch 1, which is that they want you to switch heroes in the game in the core game design. Like it's supposed to be, I'm playing this hand, oh, you counter me with this hand sort of thing. So it's like, oh, okay, well, he's going Pharah, then I'm going to go Soldier, right? That sort of thing. Like that is the core design. But player behavior never does that, especially, if you play like a lower competitive or something. But I'm convinced it's like at every rank, they want to play a character they like. Like if you look at their stats, usually it's just, I play Genji every match and that's all I do. And so it fights with that design. The player behavior fights with the design. And I think then you get a toxic experience where the players are yelling at each other to switch off like Mei to something else or whatever. And so all these kind of design choices create like a breeding ground for sort of toxicity, which is another problem with the game.
And it's interesting the parallels to WoW there, WoW rating. Like you can't just be a warrior your whole existence. Now you have to have a pocket healer and a ready to go mage, and depending on the comp you need for each new raid boss, right? And all the strain that puts on players, because like you have to have 1 million twinks ready to go, 1 million alts, and you have to go through all the.
Isn't that kind of the opposite problem, though, where it's like you want people to switch characters in Overwatch and they fucking won't. And then you want them to play their main in WoW. And then they're fucking like, oh, but I heard this boss might be 5% easier if I play a Warlock. Hold on. Let me level a fucking Warlock.
Right.
Yeah.
But I remember the core design early on was, we want you to just play your main. Alts are for fun, but we don't want people to feel pressure to roll 1 million alts for rating. But I feel later on, the famous bring the player, not the class kind of idea.
Do you have any thoughts on what they should do to really incentivize that switching up more often? Or do you think it's just like a non-starter because people find a favorite and that's just human nature?
I don't think they could really do very much about it. No,
they
do stuff like in the battle pass of like, play different classes and you earn more points for the battle pass. You can nudge them in that way, but ultimately the player wants to do whatever they enjoy, right? Like, so I don't know. I just think it's just sort of a. It's a great game idea. It's fighting player behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, But anyways, like that's one thing that I think is a problem with Overwatch 1 that's still there. They address, I mean, I haven't played the game in a long time, but they have role queue now, which I was a huge advocate for. Like Dota had that, which I liked, because who wants to queue into the game and no one wants to play a healer, right? Another player behavior thing that helps that, but yeah. So yeah, and then that's an improvement. And then just, I'm also not a huge fan of ultimates. I think the idea with ultimates is it kind of makes the game more accessible, because the player will have a button at some point, they'll kill somebody and feel cool, right? I get it. But the problem is if you take the game seriously, now everybody has to sync their ultimates at the right time. And you get mad if someone blows their ultimate on something stupid, again, creating like fights in the match with your allies, with your team. And I don't know. So the more serious I get into it, like I'm like, I want to climb the ranks. I want to do well. I just feel like I'm fighting my team, it's like hurting cats in the game. So I don't know. A lot of lessons, I think. And also I think the other thing is the game also feels old. It feels old in the sense, if you look at most shooters today, like the more popular ones, it's not just elimination arena. It's more, you can create like a player story in a session, like you think about PUBG or Apex or Tarkov. It's not just about you have to kill somebody to win. There's more agency in the player, right? I think
take it
those
back, Chris.
Yeah,
Team Fortress doesn't look a day over 40.
yeah. So I don't know, but that's just kind of my drive-by thoughts. But I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
You think he'll stick with it for a while? Or are you starting to get frustrated ranking up?
I mean, the thing that keeps me sticking with it is the kits on the heroes are fun, right? They had a new hero, Kiro. I forget her name. Rico. I don't know. It's a new healer class. I always play healers in games, and she's fun. I think Josh did her. She's fun. But
I have a similar comment. Every time I play Overwatch, it's like in the moment I'm having a blast. But the second I have to care about the meta or do like deep strategic thinking or interact with random people on the internet to, accomplish teamwork, things get a lot rougher.
Yeah, like Smash Brothers too. It's like, it's always fun as a party game, but if you're really getting competitive, it's like, okay, cool. Now you're not going to use any of your abilities. You're just going to use one attack and block and air dash or whatever. It's like, yeah. So interesting.
Have you been like mostly just solo or like duo queuing up, or are you going with like a bunch of guildies? Do you have a group that you're going in with, or are you just trying it out?
I mean, I did all of them. I did a group 5-stack, and I'm grinding my competitive matches. So the way they do the competitive now, I'm really curious on like the thesis behind this, but you have to do I think you have to do like 8 placement matches wins. So you have to do 7 or 8 wins, and then or 20 losses to get your MMR. So I don't know what that. There must be some reason behind this. Seeding MMR and the placement. It's interesting. This is a whole other topic. Is just the way to do placement matches. Players hate placement matches. I don't know why. I mean, I kind of know why, but they just want to know their rank soon. And you would think the placement matches and figuring out what their true MMR is would be faster rather than needing more games to do it. Because basically, and this is some stuff they did with DeepMind, or what's the Google AI thing with StarCraft. They're able to know your MMR within 3 minutes of seeing you click around in the map. There's a way to like train models to figure out your MMR really quickly. You don't need to do placement matches. It's a very old GDPR. What's it called? It's the True Skill sort of system. Yeah, it's very old, and I don't see it sticking around very much longer. There's way faster ways to figure out the player's skill level that are more accurate. But it's interesting to see Overwatch still with this model. But
well, we've got like 10 minutes till we usually open the floor. I feel like maybe we should just like hear from Candace a little bit on Wrath and kind of maybe part to it. It's feeling like that's maybe more the vibe here, and we can do like a major topic next week. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, that there's so much to talk about.
I know. Where do you start? But like, That was very, very early on in your career at Blizzard, and it's just like, I don't know. I don't hear like a lot of behind-the-scenes anecdotes Chris really dished today. And all those are cool, talking about class design and spells and everything. Like, where were you back in, I guess, like, what, mid-2007-ish Wrath development was probably going, or like early 2007? It started off like probably right as BC launched, like kind of set the scene.
So for me, my first raid boss that I made in World of Warcraft was in the patch 330 Ice Crown Citadel. It was Blood Queen Lanethel, and that was like my first thing that I made as a designer. And it's wild because I worked on Wrath of the Lich King in QA, like the actual like box launch, right? And it was by far the most heinous crunch I had at Blizzard up until I think Legion was actually my most heinous crunch. But it was also back in the day before people were talking about it, you know? Like I think it was before EA had gotten sued, or there was no enforcing. Certainly, like at some point they had started saying like you can't work 7 days a week. Like the state of California says that like you can't work a seventh day or something like that, instead of like, or no, maybe it was like you can't work 2 months straight. It was something I can't even remember because we had no boundaries back then. But so Wrath of the Lich King development was just wild. Like there were these full of like monster energy drinks because everyone is just so exhausted. I think that also coincides with moving to the new building. So we just, and this building was not very large. There were like 2 different buildings. One had GMs and customer service, and then the building that I like interviewed in and got hired in, I actually got hired the day of the Burning Crusade champagne toast. Then for those who don't know, Blizzard would, whenever they launch a game, they would celebrate by buying hundreds of bottles of champagne. They're not like, probably like hundreds of bottles of champagne. And then everyone goes out in the courtyard and they shake it, and then they like fire it at each other and like your face and your eyes, and you just have a champagne fight because fuck it, right? And what I learned was they had like a bad one or something. And so the year before, Kevin probably knows, they had like a bad one, like where people got in like fist fights. I guess people are getting drunk. Like there's no bro culture, toxic culture in games circa 2006. Boom, believe me. And so they had actually said like, okay, no more champagne fights. It's going to be apple cider Martinelli's fight. Martinelli's is a sparkling apple cider that doesn't have alcohol, for those who don't know. But they had done that the year before, and everyone was sorely disappointed, right? They wanted to. There's something evocative about having fights with champagne, right? Champagne is supposed to be this high ticket beverage, and it says something about you that you can say, "Fuck it, I can just pour it in the pool," right? Like I can spray you with it. We can have fights, like money fights. You know, it makes you feel like bigger than you are.
The only thing I'll testify to is a lot of team members not being able to stop telling me how much they loved me after about an hour in.
Oh, yeah, I love you.
I love you, man. I love you, man. I just love you so much.
Nerds and alcohol don't mix. Yeah.
I always say I was Blizzard's Coyote Ugly because they finally reintroduced the champagne fight, and it was for Burning Crusade. They had a champagne fight in the courtyard, and I'll explain what Coyote Ugly is for those who don't know.
There we go. Yeah.
And I come in for my interview for QA for World of Warcraft, and I'm like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, I think I'm like 21 years old. And there was this test that you had to take to prove that you knew stuff about the game because they wanted people who were familiar with the game. Anyways, I come in and I'm interviewed by this person, and I won't use his name, but he goes, first of all, his office is very small, and there aren't many offices. In fact, whenever you walked into the QA area, there was like one office immediately to your left down a hallway, and that's where the managers were. So whoever like was the manager on shift basically at that moment would be in that office. And then QA was just a bunch of cubicles beyond that in a windowless room. And it had like these mood lights, and it was like totally a gaming nerd paradise. It was so cool. There was like swag all over the place, and an orc statue with like a cod piece.
It must have smelled so good down there.
Oh, it was like a locker room. It was not great. In fact, when we moved out of that office, the lights are always off, right? They finally turned the lights on the day that you were to come collect your stuff, And that's when you would just see the level of filth. Like people had like Coke rings on their desk, and the ground is like you could tell where people walk because there's like a walk path of dirt. It was like it was the dirt. It was so gross. And I was like, oh my God, I used to work.
Yeah, are we talking like people not using coasters or like rings of blow? Is that a euphemism?
No, like Coke rings being like someone had a Dr. Pepper on their desk because we also had free soda back in those days. And they would just like, and you know, someone gets on the edge or something and there's just like sticky circles of soda. No, there wasn't a drugs thing.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So second stage, like 21-year-old bright-eyed Candace walks in. I sit down in this office and all I can smell is booze. I'm just like, what is going on? And this person, he's just like, he's sitting across his desk and he's had kind of has his hands in his head in his hands. He's like, Candace, I'm so sorry. Like, I forgot I had an interview today. We had a champagne fight. He wasn't very drunk. He was just covered in champagne. But I didn't know that. I thought he was just, I was like, this is so, you're drunk. What's going on?
What a great representation of the company.
Yeah. And he's like, I'm going to give you this test. I'm going to try to go like change. I think there was a shower. And he's like, I'm going to try to change. Because he was just like dripping, I guess, in champagne. And so I'm taking this test. And it's like the test to get into QA was hilarious. It was like, I know we're not even at Wrath of the Lich King. I'm sorry, the story's going old, but you wanted a sneak peek behind the scenes, and so here's my story.
Yeah, I'm not reading this on Kotaku, so keep going.
Yeah, and so this test is like there, and there, grammar. It's like, can you spot the, you know, a good QA tester needs to be able to spot, you know, English grammar if you're going to be QAing in English, math problems, logic problems, and then there was also like, where does the Beast Stalker's tunic drop? And because he left me there, I finished that test in like maybe like 5 or 10 minutes, and he hadn't come back for like a while. And so that was how I got hired into Blizzard. And so the joke was that like everyone was drunk, and then they woke up the next day and they hired this chick Candace because like I was one of 2 women on the floor at that time. So there weren't a lot of women at the time.
Amazing.
And so that. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to start to bring it back. I was just curious about how the like kind of shadowing before you stepped into the role and made Blood Queen Lanathiel kind of went. Like, how did you cut your teeth before they were like, here you go, make an encounter?
Yeah, this is not going to be a great, like, probably this doesn't age well. But so the reason I told that whole story is that was 2007. I got hired in 2007. And so we had just launched Burning Crusade. And so I wasn't working on Wrath of the Lich King yet. So setting the stage, that's Wrath of the Lich King. I had been in QA for like a year and some change at that point. It was there's fierce competition because people in QA, it wasn't like a career as much as it is now. Back then, it was like there was there was part-time QA, which I was hired as like a contractor, which means after 6 months, if I couldn't provide or show my value, then I would be fired, or I would get hired on full time. And then that was like a QA tester to QA analyst or something, or like, yeah, I think something like that. And the pay difference was huge back then. I made $10 an hour, which Best Buy was paying me more than that. The job that I had before I went to Blizzard was paying me more. But going to full time was a solid, like, I think $12 an hour. Like a 20% raise, which was like all the difference whenever my rent back then was like $1,400 a month. And I'm like in QA. And this new office was so pristine. Like we had walked out of that old office and it was disgusting. And like we go to this new office. Now there's like windows and there's lights on. And I remember I said, "Gosh, I'm going to have to start wearing makeup to work now." Things that don't age well. But that crunch that year, everyone was so excited to like be in the new office, and because Wrath of the Lich King was like a huge success, they were expanding the development team, which meant that people in QA could apply to become a game designer or, you know, entry level like development team positions, and the competition was really fierce. And they sent out another test. There's like associate game designers will often be given a test to say like, show how much you know about video games or whatever. And I guess it gets graded and then you get an interview. And so I had my interviews. I guess I passed my test and I got the job in March of 2009, which was like right as Ulduar was coming out. I was doing all the QA testing. I was like the raid test lead for Ulduar at the time, and I was doing all like I was going to do all my onboarding and stuff, but they told me not to start until they like wrapped up Ulduar, and so I didn't actually start on the team until June of 2009. And all I had ever done was like at Blizzard was like fight raid bosses, test like dungeons and encounters and stuff like that. I was like super into it, and I would give them feedback all the time, and I would curate the feedback from the team. And so my first assignment, as I sat down at my desk, was like, okay, first thing you're gonna do, new person. They would call me the FNG, which was like, usually it's the fucking new guy, but I was the fucking new girl. You would fix people's tooltip bugs, or you would like fix other people's bugs, basically, to like cut your teeth. So I'm like fixing someone else's bugs. I didn't know how to do anything in the engine. Imagine if you launched like the Unreal editor and you're just like, I have no idea what to do. A week later,
no one walked you through the WoW edit?
I got a day of sitting in front of WoW edit, and it was the kind of thing where I don't want to use any names, but he opened the editor and he's like, this is exactly what this does and this does and this does and this does. No chance to like use it. It was just like introducing me to everything, but there's no absorption whenever you just give so much information.
Because I did something very similar for Chris, and I can only imagine how boring it was. like how many times Chris must have been just like, yeah, I'll figure it out as I go, right? Like, because you're right, there's just zero absorption.
They were like, we want to pair you with this person, we'll also go nameless, and we want you to just design all we want to make interesting trash for the first time. Or not for the first time, because that's like rude to say, but they were like, we really want to index on like interesting trash. The trash being like the encounters between encounters in dungeons and raids. I'm sure everybody knows what trash is. And so I was paired with this other like more senior designer, and we came up with a plan to do all of the trash. And the trash in Icecrown Citadel, like it was a divide and conquer kind of thing. So he took there's like a Valkyr area that had something really sophisticated. It was like a gauntlet, which was something that's like technically demanding and hard to do. And I started doing the gunship trash because that was the easiest. We had all the models in because it was just going to be players, we weren't waiting for anything. And so I'm doing gunship trash, and I think itemization came into our office and said, we need another boss, finish the tier. So you need to tack in a boss somewhere. And it was decided that it would be in the vampire wing because they already like knew which one it was. But they had already been working on the last boss of the vampire wing, which was, they were like, okay, we're gonna do a boss, and it's gonna be like the Blood Queen. She didn't have a name or anything like that. And then it was kind of determined that I would do it because I was the woman in the office. And that kind of became my thing. Is like, if there was a female boss, then I wanted to do it because I felt like I could give it, I don't know, more soul, or I don't know. It just felt like I could identify with it or something like that. And yeah, there's my little origin story. That was a really long story. Sorry. Oh, Coyote Ugly was a movie. But Coyote Ugly also means that it's like a really bad term for like you get too drunk and you go to bed with someone, right? Like have sex with them, presumably. And then when you wake up, you realize that they're like not as attractive as you thought they were whenever you went to bed with them because you had your beer goggles on. And then so the coyote thing is that you would rather gnaw your own arm off than to wake them up before you leave. And so that was my story.
Thank you. Chris, welcome. Maybe you could introduce yourself. Excited you're up here.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yep.
just fun.
I'm Chris Bell. I'm a game designer and director now, actually. Previously worked on, I was a designer producer on Journey. I was the lead designer of What Remains of Edith Finch, and I was the lead designer of Sky, Children of the Light, which is kind of the pseudo sequel to Journey. And my question is less a development one and more just fun story time question, which is, one, I would love to know which classes each of you played and why. And with that, if you could share stories from playing WoW, maybe like one of your favorite stories that emerged from your time playing WoW. I certainly have my own. Would love to hear from the group.
Kevin, you want to go first?
Evan.
Yeah, so I played, I always kept a max level Alliance character and a max level Horde character. The two I picked were, and the one I put the most time into was my Alliance Paladin. I felt like the Paladin, because the Paladin, some of his elements were last to go into the game. and then I felt like they didn't get enough tuning time. I picked a paladin intentionally to stay on top of like what the class needed and to experience it firsthand, and felt like a lot of the other classes were in a pretty good space. So, and then I just stuck with it throughout my time playing and designing, which is always funny because I think a lot of people generally feel like the developers play one class and then give them all the best stuff. And so when I tell them that I was a Redditon playing, they're pretty shocked to hear it because Redditon felt left out in the, sort of special attention, overpowered mechanics or whatever it is, especially early on. So, and then my Horde character was an undead mage, and I sort of barely kept that one leveled as time just didn't allow for me to play the game as much as I would have wanted. But yeah, so mainly Redditon, and it was definitely an interesting experience, but it gave me a lot of insight on how to work on things from that class perspective, early on.
Chris?
Chris, good question. The class I mostly played in the very beginning of the game was Druid. The reason why is I played in the beta, and I remember I played Warcraft 3 a lot, and everybody was saying, we're going to go play WoW. And I was like, what the hell is that? And I looked it up, and you could look at the different pages for the different classes, and they mentioned the Druid could turn into a crow, like a crow form, right? And I was like, oh my God, like why would anyone play anything else? You could like fly around in this game and, gank people and stuff like that. So I think they call it travel form. And I just imagine a travel form, and it had like an icon of the crow from Warcraft 3. And I knew like in Warcraft 3, of course, the Druid's Talon could fly. So I just imagined you could fly as a Druid. And so that's mainly like why I picked the Druid. I also just like Night Elves. But it was like the main class I played. But I usually played every healer. It was like mainly the classes I played: Druid, Priest, that sort of thing. Kind of like every class. I had multiple alts that I would play: Warlock, Hunter. I try to play all the classes that I worked on too, at least at some basic level, like if it's dungeons or some pug raids and stuff like that. So yeah, those are the main classes I played.
Candace?
I played Priest up until, I want to say Burning Crusade. Wait, was it? No, maybe. Yeah, I was. I played Priest. I got my Atiyesh. And then eventually we started doing Sunwell. Oh, that was Legion. That was a Burning. Yeah. We started doing Sunwell, and we needed a shaman. So I had to roll a shaman. And that's kind of like whet my appetite for playing other healers. And so after that, I played Holy Paladin for Cataclysm. And then when Mop came out, I was a Mistweaver. And then I finally indexed on my ult, which was my Druid, by the next expansion, Warlords of Draenor. And then I never went back to my Priest, which is really sad because I loved the Priest. And one of my favorite stories from WoW was from WoW Classic, when we did our the vanilla. When we did the AQ War opening or AQ War Gate opening, whatever. My guild ran a contest every week, which was if you can give us the most resources. I would run this on a spreadsheet in Excel for everyone in the server, and I would loot my mailbox all day. I was like, you mail me the stuff and I will give you a point, and the person with the most points at the end of the week, I'm going to post it on the forums, and then you get a free run through Molten Core. We'll let you loot anything you want in Molten Core. And so we did, and there was this one gnome mage, and her name was Sevan, Sevan. If you're listening, I love you so much. She was just the most enthusiastic, so grateful. She ended up getting the trinket off of Baron Geddon, and she ended up getting everything her little heart desired, she got. But when we were doing Baron Geddon, I also had I had an add-on back then, which was hot shit. An add-on would send someone a tell when they had the explosive debuff. I think it was called not Burning Adrenaline. That was the other one. You would get this explosive debuff where if you stood next to someone, you would explode and you would kill the whole raid or whatever. So it would send you a tell telling you to run away. But what it would say is, oh, it's living bomb. That's right. Because it sent her a tell and it said, you are the bomb, in all caps. And then as she exploded on our raid and killed us, she typed back to me hey, thanks. That was the best story.
I'll go. I'll let you close this out there, Chris. I started as a rogue, but I mostly made a warrior in vanilla. And I made an alt, and then once I realized that you could do sweeping strikes into Whirlwind, there was no way I was kind of going back. They were just more fun for damage. And on Horde with Wind Fury, it was incredible. It was like a dopamine machine. So I DPS'd for a long time. Eventually I got Thunder Fury. I tanked for a while until I got so stressed out feeling like my guild owned my entire life that I just quit the game and eBayed my account for about $1,000, which was like a month and a half's rent back in 2006. So real clean break. Yeah, I don't know. I've come back and I've played a ton of different classes. I've never really attached to the same degree, but I really liked Monk and Legion. All the specs. Tanking was really just a joy. And I leveled all the classes all the way up and did all the mage towers because it was just like that's what you did. And I think if I were to like go back and only ever play a class again, I'd probably do shaman pretty much all the way through. I just like, in my age, their aesthetic has really kind of stuck with me, and I had a lot of fun doing that. Like a lot of options, I feel like, for skill expression, and just they're fucking cool. You can turn into a wolf. You got everything you want. So I don't know. I feel like probably my fondest memory of WoW overall is probably the zombie invasion, I would say, or World PvP during Chris's BFA incursions or whatever the fuck they were in 8.1. Like that was some of my favorite times ever. Just blowing people off the cliff at Borealis, trying to get my sweet, sweet Crowlusk in my title, which I did. What about you, Chris? Favorite class? Favorite memory?
Yeah, so I never played much late game WoW. I was never able to dedicate the time, and nor did I really need to or want to. I played Rogue. I love Rogue. My avatar is actually for our company. We all choose avatars based on classes, and I chose a Rogue. But my favorite memories come from the way I would play Rogue. Is I was an Alliance Dwarf Rogue, and I would hang around Taran Mill. I was a backstab crit Rogue, and I would basically defend. There's a lot of like PvP that happens around there, especially like higher levels picking on lower levels as they're trying to complete their quest. And I would just go around making the hordes, days of living hell and just like stun them, backstab crit them. If I couldn't kill them because they were higher level than me, I would at least be a gnat in their ear, and I would, spit on them and disappear and come back the next time when they tried to do it again. And I would just protect the Alliance people and allow them to do their quests while I got no real benefits from doing this. I just, it brought me joy knowing that I was making everyone else's day hell. So that's how I would play Rogue.
The only way to play Rogue, I think.
Oh, and I will say that one of the other best moments in WoW for me is a particular quest where I don't know where it is. You guys are well more versed in WoW than I am, but there's a particular quest in this like out on this. There's this castle out on some precipice, and you ascend the castle, and you get this slowfall cape. And the kind of reward for getting the slowfall cape is like the most epic drop down. It reminds me of like if you ever played Crackdown. There's like the final. If you ascend, you get all the orbs in Crackdown to jump to the highest point. There's like a little fountain at the base of this epic citadel. The company, the bad organization citadel or whatever. And if you jump down into it, you get an achievement. But it had the same kind of feeling in WoW, where you go all through all this work to get to the end of this quest. You get the slowfall cape, and then you just have the most epic jump of your life. And that was that always stuck with me.
Yeah, I hear you on dedicating the time. It's tough to go back, and like I tend to want to go back with like the same intensity that I used to play. And if I can't, I kind of don't really want to. So sometimes I think it's better to just let stuff lie. But well, thanks so much, man. We should have you as a guest on the show sometime. I feel like major untapped resource just hanging out. Thank you so much.
Let's bring it home.
Let's bring it home. Cool. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us for this kind of ambling Wrath Part 2 extravaganza. We'll be back in a couple weeks. Chris, we missed you last week. Please take us out.
Yeah. Good being back, and we'll see you soon. Later, gamers.